Right. As Will said, I'm going to concentrate on the St Giles Circus project just to give you a look and feel of how that project is working, how we're developing some of the ideas, and hopefully the technology that goes into that building will work better than this. I think we should be okay. We've got some movie clips, so let's see how we get on. But just to give you a bit of background as to who we are, as Will mentioned to me earlier, we used to be called ORMS. We rebranded to ORMS. ORMS was about the founding director's initials, but we rebranded about 3 years ago. We're up to sort of 65 in terms of size of the practice, which we've actually gone up about 10% in the last sort of 6 months. So we've been fairly busy over the last few months. In terms of us as a practice, looking at that very bottom line, that we create an architecture that listens. When we rebranded and rethought about who we are and what we do, one of the things that kept coming back to was people and how we interact with people, the spaces we create for people, and how it's very important as an architect to collaborate with anybody from local communities to people that will make things for you, people that will help you achieve what you need to achieve. And that's why we think that innovation comes from asking the right questions, but also interacting with the right people. And as part of what we do as a practice, there are things such as the magazine Design Exchange and Lighting magazine that I work on the curator's board. We also interact with the London School of Architecture, and there are things such as feasibilities and research programs with the NLA, and this Saturday I'm doing Battle of Ideas down at the Barbican. As a practice, we work across a range of sectors, and everybody will say to you, oh, what sectors do you specialize in? My retort to that is we specialize in architecture, because architecture is not just about workplace, it's not just about developing hotels or schools. It's about creating spaces and environments and creating the infrastructure for people to inhabit buildings. So we do everything from, this is workplace on the left-hand side. This is 1 and 2 Stephen Street. We're currently doing this hotel with the Standard, which is opposite King's Cross Station. And we do everything from school projects. We did quite a few projects for Uppingham School. And I am slightly ashamed to say it, this is a replica tube car in a reception in Aldgate, not the real thing. London Underground wouldn't give us one. Alongside that, we also do new builds, we do refurbishment. So again, people will say to you, what do you specialize in? And it's not just practices just do new build and practices just do refurbishment. I think one of the key things in refurbishment is that you need to understand the building. You need to understand where it comes from, how it works, so that you can then adapt it. So this one that we're just finishing is called Number 1 New Oxford Street, and that is centre point at the far end. So this is on the corner of New Oxford Street and High Holborn that we've just finished about a month ago. And the reason I put this slide in is the green glazed panels that you see on the nose of the building and also on these cores here. The reason that we ended up with that is that we found, through our research, a number of letters between the architect and the Crown advisor, who was no other than Sir Giles Gilbert Scott. And back in 1929, when this was designed, La Fontaine wanted to use green glazed panels. And in the letter back from Sir Giles Gilbert Scott, he said it was too innovative back in the late 20s, early 30s. So when we found that, the first thing that we did was we went straight to the planners and said, we want to get rid of this precast and put these glazed panels on the building. And so that idea of your research and your thoroughness is really important to what you do as an architect. And we work a lot across London. So the blue bit is the Thames. You can see that we made one journey south of the river. Predominantly, we're on the north side, going east-west, and also going down to Richmond. We do stuff out with London, but what is fascinating about this slide when we did it within the office is that is almost along the new Crossrail line. So straddling north and south of the new Crossrail line, running through the centre of London. So the project I'm going to speak to you about, as I said, is St Giles Circus. And what I'm going to do is give you an overview of the project, the concept and the thinking behind it. I'm then going to focus on sort of three main things to give you an understanding of the construction sequence, because it is quite fascinating. The facade, how we've developed with a cladding contractor this facade here in particular, which has 9-meter high by 2.5-meter wide louvers that rotate and then slide apart. And I'll show you the prototype, the video of the prototype. And then down here, this is the 17th century smithy or forge that we have moved. And this has just been moved back into its original position within 7 millimeters of where it started life. And that literally, about 2 weeks ago, got moved back into its position. So to set the scene for you, this is Oxford Street, which runs from the corner of St Giles all the way down to Marble Arch, then New Oxford Street, then Tottenham Court Road going north, and Charing Cross coming south. And interesting, St Giles fits in this really interesting slot in between a number of different sort of parishes or boroughs. So you have Fitzrovia to the north, Bloomsbury, and then you've got Covent Garden and Soho. And this red line here is the boundary between Camden on this side and Westminster on this side. And Crossrail straddles basically the middle of that road. So it's quite interesting how you'll see how that has evolved quite recently. Just some of the key maps. Now, interestingly for you to note is that up until Centrepoint arrived, which is this map here, there was always this really interesting termination of St Giles Circus, as it was called, and how you can see from this development map, this is St Giles Church here, and that sat within the grounds of the former St Giles Hospital, that you can see the density of development that occurred in actually quite a quick time period. And it became a very prominent nose in that east-west, north-south connection. So interestingly, St Giles historically has always been one of those major points of interaction with London. So if you look right back in time, Ackroyd did this really nice piece about how it was the main entrance and exit to the London fairs of its time. It has also been notorious in terms of it being squalors. It got cleared. It had light industry. It's got a real fascinating history. And then when Centrepoint came along just before the 70s, that's the tower there, and then that's the L-shaped block with the road that used to run underneath. This part of the site got completely obliterated. So you can see here, this was that round corner building that was St Giles Circus. So that's the theatre that's on the corner of New Oxford Street and Tottenham Court Road. That's been replaced by essentially the podium of Centrepoint. And you can see that the history, and when you come down to St Giles High Street and then on to Denmark Street, a number of these buildings still survive to date, and they are part of the site as we see it. So just to orientate yourself, that's Oxford Street there, Tottenham Court Road, Charing Cross coming down, and then New Oxford Street going off to the east. So Centrepoint, the tower, main tower is there, and then the L-shaped block, which used to have the road running underneath, which is now gone. The grey bits are really to show you the areas that were cleared during the compulsory purchase under the Crossrail Act. So this is one of the major interchanges between east and west, and there's also a major intersection between that, the Northern Line and Central Line. So the amount of people that will be arriving and exiting from this station is enormous, and you'll see a video in a few minutes about how that works. We're obviously surrounded by some Grade 2 listed buildings, which are these. The Grade 1 listed building is what's termed as St Giles in the Field. And our site that I'm going to focus on is on the north side of Denmark Street. And then there are some buildings on the south side, which Ian Chalk, who actually was taught in Westminster, he is carrying out those works. So we agreed to split those. He used to work with us, so he set up on his own. And so he's doing the south side of Denmark Street, but we're going to focus tonight on the north side. So some of the sensitivity around this site focuses on Denmark Street, or what is often referred to as Timpan Alley. And Timpan Alley, since the turn of probably about 1900, 1910, became synonymous with the music industry. So there used to be a number of music writers and publishers that would be on the street, and people used to turn up, knock on the door, play the music. The music then used to be brought in and placed with artists. That then evolved into, there is a former club here, sorry, in this building here, which was the 12 Bar. And it was a very important music venue in that a number of artists used to have their first gigs here. So people like Elton John have played here, David Bowie has played here, even up to Ed Sheeran and Adele did their first ever sort of concert in this venue here. And along this part of the street, there's a number of music shops that have guitars, keyboards, and the like. On the south side, there's an equally interesting history in that the Sex Pistols recorded one of their first ever albums on the south side of the street. So this area is synonymous with music. The interesting bit for you is that the music, we've been accused of a number of things, and I'll share these with you in a bit, but one of them is gentrification. Now, interestingly, when music came along, it actually displaced light industry. So you could say that that was the first iteration of gentrification, if that's how you term it. And I think we're moving to a point where technology has changed the music industry in a phenomenal sense. So much so that apart from the few guitar shops that are left on that street, there's little else in terms of the music industry there. They are all scattered throughout the UK. So could our scheme be part of knitting that back together? Now this lovely diagram is quite interesting. The purple is the Northern Line escalator. The escalator box sits here, but this purple is connected to the Northern Line. The green is the new Crossrail tunnel, and as you can see, that runs right through our site. So some of the constraints that we had were Crossrail on this side, the Northern Line escalator box coming up just 2 meters below the corner of our site on that Charing Cross, or former Andrew Board Street frontage. So why has this been such a big thing, and why is this site so prominent? I mentioned Crossrail earlier. That is, its tentacles are reaching far east and far west. And the amazing thing about this is that you will be able to get east to west from the center of town within 10 minutes. So Canary Wharf to Tottenham Court Road will be in around 10 minutes, which is phenomenally quick. It suddenly changes your interaction with culture, with music, with food. You will just leave your office and you can be right in the heart of the centre of London. Tottenham Court Road is one of the only stations that is planned to have Crossrail 2 intersecting with it as well. So linking that back to historically it being one of the main entrances and exits to the City of London, if it will have Northern Line, it will have Central Line, Crossrail, and possibly Crossrail 2 if that ever happens. So what did we want to do with the site? So we were contacted back in 2009, and just to give you a flavour of the time scale, this is due to finish Q1 2020. So this project is about 11 years from getting it to actually delivering it. And so take your mind back to sort of 2009 and into the beginning of 2010. The idea was, how do we create a really interesting brand that could be a welcome to London? It could offer a series of things that London either doesn't have or they are much further away from being right in the centre. So we were looking at everything from, you've got Tate Modern up on the top left, bringing the technology that Apple may have. And the idea was, could we use technology, could we use screens to help have and create a brand that was ever changing? Laced in with that was the idea that could we create a venue, and a venue being something that's crossed between either music venues, event venues, or what's termed here as a mixed use. If you look at the music venues, they're sort of dotted around the outside. You can then see that event venues sort of come in nearer the centre, but then mixed-use developments, again, are not in that heart of that space. So the thinking was, could we address some of the issues that were going on at the time, which was a number of live music venues were being closed down. So you may have seen the Music Venues Trust report about the closure of venues, which touches on a number of things from licensing, business rates, and the ability to just simply run a venue, because a venue invariably, if it's quite small, gets tied up. So if you have a concert in the evening, it might be tied up for the whole day, and then possibly the day after, till it's cleared out. And so the turnaround time is quite tricky in that. So there's been the loss of Turn Mills, the Astoria, which is just on the other side of the road. And then what you're also seeing is there's a rationalization of a number of other music venues to becoming slightly larger venues, such as run by O2. So coming back to the site then, and what the sort of the considerations that we had. So again, just to place you, Denmark Street being Tin Pan Alley, there's a number of new developments. So HMM are doing this one just on the other side of Charing Cross Road, and that's going to be an above ground office building, but there's also going to be a theatre and a little piazza here. So coming out the new glass entrance box, the consideration was that St Giles High Street is now going to be fully pedestrianised, so no longer will there be vehicles running underneath that tower. So this is going to have retail on this left-hand leg here. Buses are going to be diverted either down Denmark Street or along New Oxford Street. So as you come out of the exit, one of the key points was that how do we get the number of people that are going to be coming in and out of this exit onto the site, but also through it and down to either Covent Garden, down through Shaftesbury Avenue, or connecting across to Soho Square or into St Giles Plaza itself. To give you a flavour, they're talking about anything up to 400,000 people per day coming out of that exit, which is quite extraordinary. So how does that actually sit on the site? So these are the two new glass boxes that were done by Stanton Williams. And the green areas that have buildings A and B are the new builds. There is a new build here which tucks in behind the backs of the Denmark Street buildings. And the blue is really demarcating where all of the existing buildings have been retained, they're being refurbished, some are being extended. So one of the key things that we did in terms of positioning this building was that there is a new alleyway between buildings A and B that then picks up Denmark Place. So the back of this building is on the line of the former frontages that were removed by Crossrail. And then we're cutting through one of the buildings to create this arcade that links Denmark Street back with the main entrance from Crossrail. So how does this actually work? So this is the Crossrail box that faces towards Covent Garden. So you'll see in a second, we're building up to 5 stories below ground. So plant is going to be further down the building. That's the Crossrail tunnel that runs diagonally through the site. So we're actually building on top of and around and holding down the new Crossrail tunnel. And in this particular space here, we're creating a multi-purpose venue. So it can be used for anything from product launches, for conferences, but also for concerts and gigs. And the idea is that this can hold up to 2,000 people in gig mode, which is a replacement for the Astoria, which was on the other side of the street. Key to this is that this has what's termed a box-in-box construction. So the outer line is the concrete slab and frame. This inner line is an isolated structure so that the sound and reverberation going out as well as coming in means that this can be minimized to be what's termed a world-class venue. Now the key to all of this, and a key to this space here, has been the use of LED technology. So we're going to be lining both of those spaces with an LED skin. And the idea is that we're going to be curating the content so that you can literally change from product launch to gig mode into music mode in a matter of hours, not days. And that's part of the thinking that has changed how we can incorporate music onto the site itself. I'll show you some images in a second, but this space here is what is called the Urban Gallery. And the Urban Gallery will be open, or the facade will be opened up in the morning so that you will literally spill out into this 4-story space that will be have a digital skin lining both the walls and the soffit. And it will be everything from a welcome to London through to promoting, let's say, products or the local retailers. And then on top of the building, we then have conference facilities and retail. So very, very roughly, the building is split into sort of three zones. One is about sort of hospitality, where we have a bar linking into a restaurant and conference facility. We then have the urban gallery on Building A, and then Building B is a mixture of office space and a bit of retail. And then below ground is what we've called the auditorium. So that's the multi-purpose use space that can be changed very quickly. So just looking down on that urban gallery, the idea is bring people into this space that is ever changing. A number of people have said, oh, this is like Piccadilly Circus and the screens there. It absolutely is not like Piccadilly Circus. Piccadilly Circus is a static engagement. Once you've seen Piccadilly Circus and what's on the screens, that's it. The idea here is that you can create a totally immersive experience. So again, it could be anything from the PlayStation Championships are held in here, and you've got the whole course around you and above you, completely immersive, to it might be a pre-gig where somebody like Ed Sheeran does his pre-gig before going down into the underground venue. So the idea is that this is a space that you come back to time and time again. So it could be anything from linking up with the Tate to doing the next Damien Hirst or whoever display, through to displaying Denmark Street. And we really like this idea that on this side of the site, you have technology and how technology could help inform the tradition of music. On the other side of the site, you then have the traditional music, and then you could engage with the technology if you want to. And if you don't want to, just keep away from either. We're quite happy for you to do that. And then it's all the way through to, in the evening, what has been discussed is that we could curate what is happening in the area or nearby in other venues. So again, it's a go-to place to find out where you might then carry on to in the evening itself. And then down below, just some of the ideas, this LED skin, which we are literally creating a volume in which you can then change to anything you want it to. So I'm going to focus on the two buildings above ground first, and then we'll move on to the smithy. So the concept for the two new buildings, A and B, was based on the idea of the cabinet of curiosities. So the idea that the red frame, which is not going to be red, but in diagrammatic form, holds these sort of two volumes, and the two volumes open and close to reveal different things at different times. So it's the idea that when you open it, you discover something new, and then you go around to the other side and then you open up something else. You engage with it in many different ways. So the first part we'll talk about is what we call or what's been referred as the now building. So this is what was Building A and Building B. So the 4-story gallery space is in behind here. And then just to the right is a small 15-bed hotel. There's then a conference facility, then restaurant, and then there's a bar at the other side. So as I said earlier, all of this facade at ground floor opens up, so you're literally spilling out into that space and blurring the boundaries between what is inside and what is outside. Now this is the structural engineer's model, and we're going to go into a sort of a sequence about the logistics of how this building is going to be built. But to give you an idea, so that's ground there, and that's Charing Cross Road. This column here, believe it or not, is not doing a huge amount structurally. The reason being is you can see that load would come down on top of, that is the escalator box from the Northern Line. So if you're ever coming up the new escalator box, our site in the corner of it is directly above your head if you're going up or down. Technically, that column there could be knocked out, and the way this beam structure is designed, that it would drop a maximum of 15 millimeters. So it's enormous stuff. And the main reason that it's here is to limit the deflection of these beams at the lower level, because that's where the opening facade is located. So what you'll see in the logistics sequence is that we're doing what's called a top-down construction. So what we do is we build the ground floor first. We then use little mouse holes, and you'll see them, to excavate. And then once we've excavated, is then build concrete walls and floors going down. But at the same time, we start building the cores and steel frame up. The reason being is if we didn't do that, we're going to be in the ground or below ground for 18 months. So part of the whole sequence and logistics was that you can be up above ground and below ground at exactly the same time, which means you can deliver the building more quickly. So I'm going to try and see if this is going to work. Oh, it is. Perfect. So Skanska are our main contractor, and they put together this really fascinating video, which just shows you. So this is the main piling that happens, and this is the sequence. That's the smithy, and I'll show you it being moved. So it was moved out of the way so that this piling could happen along the perimeter of the site, and this is the timeline through to the first quarter 2020. So this diagonal that's starting to appear is either side of the crossrail line. So those piles are going to get driven all the way down either side of crossrail. And then this is, so now you can see that the ground floor slab, once it's in, you can start building up as well as excavating and going down. And then you'll see there's some really fascinating, there's an adit beam which is about to come up here. And what that's basically doing is, that is creating a platform that holds the crossrail line down. So the maximum movement we're allowed at any one point on crossrail is maximum 5 millimeters of movement. So there are sensors and surveying equipment to make sure that we never cross that. So you can then start to see how some of the cladding is starting to go on. And in a minute, what will happen is this timeline will go back a little bit. But what you're starting to see is all of this cladding has been pre-designed, pre-manufactured, and is literally coming on. The building is finishing, and we are literally just finishing the below ground at exactly the same time. So there's a huge amount of logistics to go into how a building of this scale and complexity would actually work. So one of the key areas within this, so that's that Northern Line escalator box. That's our ground floor. And this is how we sort of develop the facade. So the idea of the frame of the Curiosity box, and then this glass building that sort of slots in behind it, so that behind these louvers, there's a sense of an opening and closing and things ever changing. So having tendered this to 4 different cladding contractors, we settled on a company called Frainer and Reifer, who are based in northern Italy, just by South Tyrol. And the reason that they ended up being our preferred contractor was they specialize in moving facades. So these fins are literally going to be open and closed a number of times during the day. So you can imagine that we've got to get this right. This is not a building we want 400,000 people to see in stuck open mode or stuck closed mode. It's going to be one of those, we've got to get it right. So the first stage of design, what they actually did was they built and worked up a prototype model for how these fins would work. And what they did was they tried out, this is actually a frame, and this is the frame of one of those fins. And they insisted, there are 2 mechanisms within here. There's a spindle, and then there's also a drive at the base of this. And it's based on mechanics rather than hydraulics. Their thinking was that mechanics is a tried and tested method. Hydraulics is still, it's a little bit temperamental. So once they had done that and satisfied themselves that that was the right thing to do, we had explored with them the material in which this was clad in. So the outer frames are going to be black granite. And the original concept, if I just go back one, original concept was that we had explored these being in bronze. Now, interestingly, this was developed in around the time that Bloomberg was being built. And so we found out a huge amount about the bronze material and how that works. And interestingly, that material that's on there is by a company called Kikukawa, who are based in Japan. And the louvers on that building have to be waxed at least 3 times a year. So 3 times a year, they're going to have a team of people going around waxing those louvers that you see on that building. And the reason for that is if you don't maintain that, it will start to oxidize, and some of it will green, some of it will discolor in a different way. The other alternative was that we could lacquer it, but if lacquer gets scratched, it then starts oxidizing in a different way. So what happened was that Frainer and Reifer came up with a material which is titanium-coated stainless steel. Now, there were two benefits to this. One was that you didn't have to maintain and lacquer it or wax it over a period of time. The second thing is, and we only found this out about a year ago, is that titanium stainless steel also eats pollution. So interestingly, it helps, especially in that corner of the site by Charing Cross Road, it will help that localized environment. So we did a trip to Berlin, and we went to see this building, which had been up for 3 years and had never been really cleaned and had been next to a building site. And the reason that we did this was to see how the material had changed over time, how it interacted with the street and how dirty or not it got, dense, how folds work together, how you can cut things out of this material, and really just understand what we could do with it. Because we had to, not in any particular difficult way, convince the planners that this was the right material to use. So Frainer and Reifer have then been working up how those fins, how the facades, the joints in the facades, getting the hairline in the stainless steel all in the right direction so it all looks as though it's wrapped as one panel underneath. They've been working very closely with us. And this will give you an idea of some of the complexity. So this is actually a head detail. So this is outside, this is inside, and it's on this facade opposite the Crossrail station. So that's that big beam that I showed you earlier. And this is just some of the mechanisms that are in place for those louvers to rotate and then slide back. So the movement and integration of that mechanism with that steelwork. So this steel has had to be modified in its design so that we could create all these little houses for the drives, for the cables to run through. Some of these panels have to be removable for maintenance purposes, but also still keeping the really clean, fine lines that actually we've got on the building itself. So there's a huge amount of technical consideration to get to that very sort of clean and crisp look. So one of the key considerations has been how this facade, and especially this lower part, in closed mode or shut mode, it then rotates, it then starts to open up to reveal the gallery, so that when the gallery is displaying stuff, you can either be in it or be on the street looking into it. And then just coming back round, as you come out of the Crossrail exit, the ground floor facade opens up, and you literally see 4 stories of the inside of a building. And this is the alleyway, the new alleyway that created down to Denmark Place. Now, again, this is the prototype that they did in Brixen, just to test how this louver and blade would work. So it was very useful in working out where all the gaskets go to. And also you can just see where the main runner itself is here. So this is a mechanism that just literally pulls in or pushes out the louvers. So there's the spindle that rotates it, and then there is the wheel mechanism that pulls and pushes it. So they've done an amazing job. So they're now into the next level of detail, which is to work up the final control sample of that blade. So just to complete the picture before we move on to the smithy, as we come around onto what is now St Giles Plaza, we had to retain this facade here, which was on the former St Giles High Street. So there's retail at ground floor, and what happens is that our office building then tucks in behind the facade, but we've created a sort of a 3-story atrium in behind it. So the floor plates don't come in and crash into the back of either where the floor plates were, but they're not. So we didn't want them hitting sills or glazing bars. So we've created this atrium which then extracts the air out of the top of this glazed lantern. There is a roof terrace here, and the bar is just tucked behind, and it links into Building A, which then has the restaurant at the very top of the building. As you come down to ground, we're going to walk around the side and into Denmark Place. One of the key things that we did was that you'll see that none of the titanium-coated stainless steel on the outside hits the ground. That was following that visit to Berlin, where the material is fine, but this corner is going to get an absolute hammering. So we changed this to black granite. And then we've got these black granite sleeves, and then all these doors, these are pocket sliders that all sit in fixed positions so that you'll be able to walk across the corner or into the building very easily. And then these perforations are for air in to then condition the space. And then when you get round the corner, this is looking down from the corner of Charing Cross Road down Denmark Place. So the footprint of the back of Building A is on the line of the former buildings that used to be there before Crossrail removed them. And then that's the alleyway that links you back down to Tottenham Court Road. As I mentioned, in Denmark Street or Tin Pan Alley, it has been synonymous with throughout music history. And we faced quite a lot of accusations, many of which were completely unfounded. And the primary reason for that was that nobody, or a number of people, didn't want to see the former 12 Bar leave and or the music shops. So our planning permission actually has a clause in it that says that we must have music-related uses on Denmark Street. So that could be anything from recording to selling records to having guitar shops. So the idea is that we don't come in here, clear all the shop fronts out, and then put in lots of different uses. We have to demonstrate very clearly to the council that we've tried at least 3 music-related uses before we can even have a discussion about changing it to another use. So one of the main things that happened was, in discussion with Camden, is that this shop front here was removed to create that alleyway connection. And the other alleyway that we're about to touch on is this one here that links down the side of the former 12 Bar, which links to the smithy at the back. So we've had everything from, we've been in the Evening Standard, we've been in the Guardian, we've been in the Telegraph, we've had squatters. I've been on London Live. If you don't know what that is, it's a TV station for Evening Standard, because I didn't know what it was either. And also BBC Radio London, because we were being accused of all sorts of things. Because, yes, the music, in many ways, the music industry has died in Tin Pan Alley, but the whole challenge here was, well, how can we use technology to reinvigorate it, and can we use it? Because it's been seen as technology being one of the main deaths of music. So what happened was that on the back of the positive press that we were getting, the GLA got in contact with us and said, can we come and see you? We need to understand what you are doing because we keep hearing that you're doing lots of very nasty things. Now, Paul Broadhurst from the GLA came to see us, and then you could see within 10 minutes of us starting the presentation, he went, but you're not doing any of the things that you're being alleged. And we said, no, we're actually trying to help reinvigorate music, bring it back to life. Could it be the home of British music? And this is what he introduced us to the Music Venues Trust and Sound Diplomacy, who have been in the background looking at the nighttime economy. So there is a night czar, Amy Lemaire, who has become London's first night. Well, in Amsterdam it's called the Nightmare, but interestingly they dropped the Nightmare and called the Night Czar. So she has been looking out for the nighttime economy because it is a massive, massive thing. But just to give you a flavor of the people that we have engaged with, this is just some of the people that we engaged with in the planning process. So you can imagine the vested interest in all of these different groups, from local traders to, fortunately, Councillor Sue Vincent, who lives in the area, was also the chair of the planning committee at the time. That was one incredibly useful thing. Right through to engagement with the church itself and what we could do for them. What came out of that conversation with the GLA was a really fascinating thing about what is termed the 12 or the former 12 Bar. So the former 12 Bar used to be entered from Denmark Street, and this is the smithy or forge that was at the back of the site. And this is where a number of the gigs were held, with a sort of a timber mezzanine that was just about halfway up here. Now, interestingly, in stripping out some of the finishes on here, how no one was killed in that building is quite extraordinary, because what we found was that the staircase that came down from the mezzanine wasn't actually load-bearing onto anything whatsoever. So it was quite interesting. What the GLA said to us was, could we create a below-ground grassroots music venue below what was the 12 bar? So the point there is that one of the key criteria that GLA are looking at is that grassroots music venues are anything from 100, an audience of about 100 to about 400 to 500. So they're small venues where live music can be played. And what we said to them was, we think we can create one, but in order to do it, there was a real issue and a real consideration that the smithy, if we were to build a basement underneath it and below it, might actually fall into 1,000 sticks, because it literally is quite a delicate structure. So in conjunction with Historic England, we did a whole analysis of all the buildings, and we agreed to remove number 23, which was in between the two original buildings. We removed that, and as part of it was to frame and remove this building whilst we formed the basement or the ground floor slab, and then reinstate it so that the footprint of the former 12 bar could be reinstated, and then we could put a live grassroots music venue below ground. The interesting thing about that is that that volume that creates the music venue is then backing onto the 2,000 person gig mode. So they could interconnect, they could be kept completely separate. So ahead of moving the smithy, and the smithy is actually this building here. So this is Denmark Street. We had all of these photographic and laser surveys done of the original buildings. So there were point cloud surveys overlaced with photographs to record where everything was before we actually moved it. And so the process of moving this building is that we removed the infill building. We then built a slab underneath the existing building with the building in situ. So we had to do that in two halves. We had to then frame the inside and outside of the walls. Then very simply, we just hired a crane and moved it off to one part of the site. Then step 5 was to then create the first run of piles either side of where the smithy would return to. So that slab that we added here is actually the final slab that then rests on top of these pile caps. So there you can see what we've literally just done is moved it back to this position here, and what the contractor is now starting to do is to build that ground floor slab so we can then excavate underneath to then form that music venue. So it's all easy stuff. It's all easy stuff. So this is when it was moved. So what you can see here is these steel posts are either side of the original walls. And what we did was there are ties that went through the mortar joints and the brickwork to tie and clamp the whole thing together. So this was moved by one of the contractors. And then very recently, only a couple of weeks ago, the second stage of that was to remove or to move it back from its temporary position here, back across, and the slab onto its now original home with its new ground floor slab. So as I say, that's been repositioned within 7 millimeters of where it started life. So it was an incredibly delicate operation. It took about 4 hours of stopping and starting before this then moved across. So there is a short video of this move. So you can see it coming up from its temporary position, then being moved across. This is a 900-ton crane, mobile crane, to lift that building into the original position. So all of that to create that grassroots music venue then below ground. So just to complete that picture, so what will happen is that that's the elevation of the smithy. We're then putting a glass link that is actually set back to the original infill. So back in I think it was about 1750, there was an infill that was added that left a little courtyard within the alleyway. So in discussion with Historic England, we're putting back a glass box so you can read the two listed buildings completely independently in a courtyard setting, which used to be the courtyard for the cork that then fed the forge itself. So the final couple of slides, and then I'm going to leave you with a sort of a 2-minute overview of the scheme. This is an extract from the BIM model that we've got for the building. So we are doing all of the coordination, so structure, M&E, architecture, cladding, the whole lot. So this cut through is the escalator box is coming up here. That's the underground music venue. That's the gallery, the space between them. And this is really about connecting the old buildings to the new buildings all the way through and around that site, to create something which is both about daytime but also about nighttime and how we contribute to the nighttime economy. So the idea is that at night it will have a very different look and feel. It may or may not be open like this depending on what format it's going to be in. And that's, as I say, that's where the hotel is. Conference restaurant. Then this little glass box at the very top has a 360 view of London apart from where Centre Point gets in the way. So just to leave you with this video.
The new station is designed for 200,000 passengers a day, but even that may not be big enough.
I mean, we were talking 4 or 5 years ago about 4 million passengers a day in 2016. Guess what? Last year, back in 2010, 4 million passengers a day. So we're now thinking 5 million passengers a day.
That's great. Thank you very much. Cheers.